I will skip for the moment some of the questions that were asked again for Tina and Flanders and move on to the last two presentations. If we have time, we will go back to the previous ones. And also, I see that a couple of questions were answered in writing by Tina, so thank you very much for this. So, moving on, how can we at the EU level differentiate northern countries and southern countries? The energy needs are quite different and behaviors as well. I imagine that the question has to do with the actual implementation of a building passport, if it should be somehow differentiated. I will unmute also Martin and Tina for these questions, but please, I would suggest that only one answers each question. Perhaps Martin from IFOI might have an opinion on this.
Yes, maybe I can put together a number of those questions because they belong together. The one question, well, on the privately owned versus multifamily versus single-family houses and the renovation roadmap. That is an issue. The renovation roadmap, I think, is not only targeted at single-family houses. It can be used for everybody who needs to be convinced of renovations. I think it does target mainly privately owned houses because for professionally rented property, the rationale is different. But there are also approaches of long-term ways of calculating the property value and calculating the energy demand, etc. But that's a totally different approach with much less emphasis on issues like psychological and like the individual situation of the building owner. So that is targeted at privately owned houses, and of course single and two-family houses are easier to deal with, but we've also seen many cases where, for instance, a number of privately owned flats within one multifamily house could be targeted with a renovation roadmap. Then there is one question dealing with how to deal with several installers. How can it be made less daunting to evolve towards renovation? To deal with several different installers. What we've seen in praxis is that the renovation roadmap actually can be a starting point for the energy auditor, who is either an architect, an engineer, or a skilled and independent craftsman. That is very important, that he is independent and doesn't want to sell a boiler. Then in this case, the auditor can turn into a coordinator. And so exactly this role of bringing together different kinds of installers and of deciding what needs to be done first, and also the micro roadmap of the renovation process can be taken over. And actually it is one incentive for the auditor to do a roadmap, because the name of the auditor is on the roadmap, and so if any problem occurs, the energy owner can call him and say, you said this and that, maybe you can help me now. So it actually helps to tackle that question, at least to a certain degree. And maybe one last question, one last issue. The next question. It seems it is high time for EPCs to evolve towards renovation passports. And if I put that together with another question regarding why, I mean, we have EPCs here. Why do we need a new instrument? I think those two can be very closely interlinked. Actually, why not have the EPC as a front page? You don't need any extra calculation. You can produce it with the same software tool. The only thing is that you need to further develop the EPC into something that fulfills the principles of the roadmap, which are be ambitious, be long-term oriented, be very close to the owner and his or her wishes and desires. And if that's the case, there is no reason why the EPC and the building roadmap cannot be at least very closely interlinked, or maybe even in the same document, from my point of view. I think it's more a question of the tradition of the EPC in each country. And in Germany, it was very clear we have a tradition of energy audit documents, reports, which usually have 200 pages. And that was our starting point, to reduce that to something the building owner wants to read. That was our main approach. But in other countries, I think the EPC plays a much more dominant role.
Very good, thank you. The issue of training energy consultants is also, I think, relevant. I don't know, perhaps Martin from BPIE, would you like to touch upon this? Or I think it also Martin from IFOI, you mentioned this.
Yeah, I think it's better for Martin or for Tina, maybe even.
Sorry, which question was it? I didn't get
about training energy consultants. Or yeah, I'm not sure when it was mentioned. I think also it was mentioned by Tina. It's true.
Yeah, we have a curriculum for the state level. It is actually part of the so-called Renovation Roadmap Decree, which is a legal document, and there we have a curriculum. You need 16 hours of extra training when you are already a trained energy expert consultant. So you need 2 days of additional training, and there is a curriculum and also material for that. On the national level, there isn't so far. That is going to be developed, and the question how this is going to be dealt with is, I think, still open.
Yeah, and in Flanders, we're still dealing with the profile of those energy consultants for the renovation roadmap. We don't see it yet really clear if it has to be a profile like an architect, because renovation roadmap can go very has also aspects on humidity, on stability of the building. So maybe it should be an architect, and we like to see if other profiles like experts on energy advice on the EPC can maybe with some expertise or more training can grow into the role of a renovation. Renovation. How do you call it? Renovation advisor. So it's in discussion in Flanders. We don't know yet.
I think already the fact that you're discussing the let's say where in terms of disciplines would an energy advisor, a renovation advisor come from. Already this is an indication of how complex the issues have become. And definitely not very easy for the homeowner themselves to do this kind of work. Things are getting daunting. So in this subject, there is this question. The next question, I just read yesterday that if confronted with 3 choices, a cheap, a middle, and an expensive one, people on average choose the middle one. So how about making deep renovation a middle option? Maybe by adding something like luxury renovation, probably more would choose deep renovation this way. I think Peter, you might want to add something to this, since you actually did show an example of a luxury approach, if we could call it like this, the aesthetic aspect in any case.
I can also say that that our experience from Better Home is that people do actually take the middle option. I'm not so sure that it's because it's the middle option in this case, but it's because it's say where people expect that judge that they get the most value for money, simply saying they get the energy performance, but also the comfort, and definitely adding say inspiration and comfort possibilities would help.
So it's like a cost-optimal approach to them, though it's not always necessarily cost-optimal, is it?
I don't think it's a cost-optimality analysis that lies behind the homeowners' priorities. I think they have a say less structured view on it, but have an evaluation of what is value for me. How do I get most of my investment? And it seems that purely energy renovation is not enough to make homeowners actually start doing the renovation. They want something more. Otherwise, it's the vacation to Bahamas that wins the competition.
Maybe I can add one thing to the question. You might also sell it in the following way. You might say that the whole house renovation in one step is sort of the big solution, and then you can say as an educational approach, but you can also renovate step by step, and you will can still reach the target. Maybe you use that as a middle option. So in a way, I think a lot of that has to do with the way how you convey this idea of step by step renovation.
But it's a difficult question, because I sure you cannot only focus on energy. You have to also focus, but more little on aesthetics, on thermal comfort. But it's really hard to lead to very deep renovations until the long-term path, because 2050 and the goal towards that aim is very long, and people just see some steps as reachable, but not only all the steps towards an energy efficient building. So it's really hard to attract people for the whole deep renovation, even though it's step by step, I think.
Very good. I suggest that we move to the last question from this block, and if we have time, we can move back then to some aspects on the Flemish model. Some of the most energy inefficient buildings are social housing blocks. There, the owners are very rarely the residents. For such situations, have any municipalities shown any interest in roadmaps, passports for social housing, for the motivation of tenants? I think the question would go probably to Tina and to Martin with respect to the actual implementation of such activities.
Well, it's a very interesting question. Of course, the social, as I know, the social housing sector across all member states is quite different. And for example, in countries like Netherlands, there's a very large amount of social housing, and there you see some good practices. For example, this Energiesprong project I mentioned. Can we call it a renovation roadmap? Maybe not, because it's completely holistic approach of renovation. But what is important is indeed that you set up for social housing this aggregated projects, that you really renovate not one building at a time, but you really take multiple amount of buildings, which bring down definitely the costs. That is one. But on concrete cases of these renovation roadmaps across Europe, I haven't been in contact yet, but it's something to find out. Good question.
Mm.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe from my side, Martin, from Germany, statistically in Baden-Württemberg, I cannot tell you yet, but the evaluation this year will show who actually used the renovation roadmap. I would not expect a high degree of interest from social housing because there are separate programs dealing especially with the situation of motivation of tenants and what they can do in the use phase. There is a program called Stromsparcheck, for instance, which is specifically targeted at low-income households, how they can save electricity, etc. That is not a renovation roadmap. It's maybe a little bit of a behavior roadmap or something like that, but it's a totally different program. So I would not expect a very high degree, but what we are envisioning is, in terms of future steps of the renovation roadmap, to also develop it on a level of the housing associations and the professionally interested organizations who are renting property, including social housing organizations. And there we'd have to think of different aspects, but not so much here on the motivation of tenants, but rather on the motivation of the housing organizations. Both is important, but I think these are two separate activities.
Okay, very good. We have run out of time in terms of our planned webinar. If okay with you, I would suggest to spend a few minutes more to answer the final questions which are related directly to the Flemish implementation, if I understand it correctly, before closing the webinar. Tina?
Yes.
I think the first one, which kind of entities participate in the Building Renovation Passport, you touched upon earlier. If you want to add something.
Yeah, for now on it's only regional entities, but we expect in later versions that other organizations on energy supply or on certificate organizations who certificate boilers and so on or water will also participate in the building passport.
Okay. Very good. And is there a business model?
Well, we're working. It's planned for this year that we're working on we will work on a business model for the building renovation passport. So we do not have yet one, but we will work on one so that we can include new partners and that we have a scheme for that.
I hope that today's webinar might have also given you some ideas. And finally, about the linking the Flemish building passport to awarding financial incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any plans to make this link with mortgages in particular?
Yeah, if that's possible. We have mortgages on a different level. We have mortgages on we call it energy housing. It's like a kind of institute, but more on a provincial scale, who contribute mortgages. But you have also mortgages on. No, mortgages is from the financial institutes. It could be. We also we hope that the energy performance does not only has impact on the value of the building, but also by monitoring data, it can have also an impact on the mortgage, and maybe there's a market to lower mortgages or to give automatic or to cooperate with banking systems, with the financial institutes, I mean.
And maybe if I can add one point, I think this is only the beginning of the discussion, because we see many linkage points of the renovation roadmap. For instance, the property inheritance
yes.
tax could be linked. We discussed that maybe you could get a reduction of the tax rate from 6 to 4% if you present such a roadmap. And if you, within 3 years or so, do the first package of renovation or whatever. Mm-hmm. So this discussion could only can start now with many ideas coming up.
Yes, that's true. We want to start small, and I see that many ideas come up also by new financial systems that can be worked out with the together with the building passport and the renovation roadmap. I see that there's a big market for new ideas and new concepts that we can take step by step along with the development of the tools.
Okay, Tina, thank you very much. Thanks very much to all of the panelists today, and also many thanks to the participants. We've had one of the larger audiences, as far as I remember, in a build-up webinar, and definitely the largest number of questions in a build-up webinar. I hope we've managed to answer all satisfactorily. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available after the 12th of February on the Build-Up portal. Check the section Learn Webinars, and you will find it there, where you will also find all previous webinars recorded and including PDFs of the presentation. Many thanks again, and we hope to see you again in one of our future webinars. An invitation to projects which might be listening to this webinar today. We are always open to present the work of projects that are funded by the European Commission, either under Intelligent Energy or FP7 or Horizon 2020, or other projects, other funding instruments that might be relevant, as long as they are related to energy performance of buildings, which is what Build Up is all about. If you are interested and you have your project is at a certain level which can indeed present something interesting, please do get in touch with Build Up, and we will be very happy to arrange a webinar for you. So thank you again, and well, see you in the future.
Thank you, Alexander. Bye-bye.
Thank you.